She laughed when she first heard the name Allah. To her, it was foreign, strange, and tied to a religion she believed had nothing to offer. The word didn't stir any emotions in her heart, at least not at first. It sounded distant, even ridiculous in her ears, as if it belonged to a people and a culture she could never connect with. Growing up, she had been told stories, seen news reports, and watched films that painted Muslims in a dark, narrow light. So when she heard Allah, she didn't think of love, mercy, or unity. She thought of division, conflict, and fear. And so, like many others lost in misconception, she mocked. But life has a mysterious way of challenging our beliefs, especially the ones we hold on to most tightly. Despite her resistance, something about the word Allah refused to leave her. She would hear it in conversations, see it in articles, catch it in passing on social media. At first, she brushed it off. Coincidence, she thought. But the coincidences grew. And with each encounter, something within her stirred. At night, in moments of quiet, the name would return to her, not through voices or visions, but in her thoughts, in her questions, in her wonder. Why does this name keep echoing in my mind? She began to ask herself. Curiosity, once dismissed, began to rise. She decided to search, not for truth, but for proof that her view was right. She wanted to justify her earlier mocking. She thought, I'll learn more about Islam, just enough to expose the flaws. So she opened articles, downloaded translations of the Quran, and even watched a few lectures. But instead of confirming her doubts, she found something else. Beauty. The name Allah wasn't the name of a strange god. It was the name for God, the One, beyond time, shape, color, and language. The one whose mercy surpasses his wrath, whose closeness is nearer than one's own heartbeat. She read that the name Allah has no plural, no gender, no limitation. It is not tied to a culture or a region. It is the universal name of the Creator. It wasn't about Arabs or East versus West. It was about every soul searching for meaning. She began to cry, not out of fear, but from a sense of being found. She realized her whole life had been filled with noise, and this name, this single word, had pierced through it all with clarity. As she continued learning, her heart began to change. The walls of mockery began to crumble. She no longer laughed when she heard Allah. Instead, she listened. And then she whispered it, and one day she called upon that name, not in mockery, but in desperation. She said, "If you are real, show me." And the response wasn't in thunder or lightning. It was in peace. A peace she never knew she needed, but one she couldn't live without once she tasted it. This is the story of a woman who mocked the name Allah, but discovered that it was that very name her soul had been longing for all along. It's a story of how arrogance turned to humility, of how distance turned into closeness, and of how a name she once rejected became the anchor of her heart. Because sometimes, the very thing we resist the most is the one thing that was meant to set us free. He had always viewed religion as something old-fashioned, a crutch for the weak, or a tradition for those unwilling to think for themselves. Whenever she heard the word Allah, she would scoff, assuming it belonged to a distant, rigid world she could never understand. The media she consumed, the conversations she overheard, and the environment she was raised in painted Islam as something extreme, foreign, even threatening. So she mocked, not out of deep hate, but out of ignorance, confusion, and a desire to seem clever. To her, the word Allah sounded strange and unnecessary in a world where science and logic reign supreme. But life has a quiet way of humbling even the most confident minds. During a late-night scroll through her social feed, she stumbled across a short video of a woman calmly explaining the meaning of the word Allah. Unlike anything she'd seen before, the explanation wasn't defensive or emotional. It was peaceful, rooted in reason and purity. It struck her that the name Allah wasn't just an Arabic word for God, it was a name without plural or gender, a name that reflected the absolute oneness of the Creator. That one short clip shook something in her, and she saved it, without even knowing why. Days passed, but the word kept returning to her mind, not with aggression, but with strange gentleness. It echoed not from the outside world anymore, but from within her. She began to question, why was she so resistant to a name she barely knew? Why had she never questioned her assumptions? So she began to search. First, she read articles. Then she downloaded a Quran translation. Finally, she sat through an entire lecture about the names of God in Islam. What she found wasn't harshness or fear. It was clarity, balance, and depth. She found a God who was not just to be obeyed, but deeply loved. She started whispering the name to herself, first out of curiosity, then out of connection. Eventually, it became a part of her prayers, before she even formally embraced Islam. The name she once mocked had become the name she turned to for comfort, hope, and peace. And in that journey, she realized the truth. The heart knows its Creator when it hears His name, even if the mind takes time to catch up. After that night, something shifted deep inside her. The word Allah, once used in mockery, now seemed to carry a strange weight every time it crossed her thoughts. She would hear it in a video, read it in a comment, or come across it in a conversation. And each time, it lingered. It wasn't just a word anymore. It was a presence, a quiet echo. It followed her, not like a haunting, but like a call. At first, she brushed it off as coincidence, but the repetition became undeniable. No matter what she tried to focus on, her mind kept circling back to it. She didn't know why, and honestly, it scared her a little. She began to recall moments when Muslims she had encountered used the word Allah with such love and calmness. Unlike the image she had grown up with, they spoke of Allah not as a distant figure of fear, but as someone intimately close. A God who responds to every whisper of the heart. A God who is not just watching, but listening, caring, forgiving. This was not the harsh deity she had assumed Muslims followed. This was something else entirely. She became curious. One evening, in private and away from the eyes of her friends, she searched meaning of Allah on YouTube. What she found was simple yet profound. Allah is the Arabic word for the one true God, the same God worshipped by prophets like Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. But more than that, it's a name that can't be pluralized, can't be feminized or masculinized. It is unique. It doesn't just mean God. It means the one beyond comprehension, yet closer to you than your own soul. She sat in silence, her heart trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. It was as if the very word she had mocked was the word her heart had been waiting to hear. She didn't convert overnight, but that night marked the beginning of a new relationship. A relationship with a word, a name, and ultimately, with the Creator. The mocking had ended, the echo had begun to speak, and slowly, she started listening. The more she tried to ignore it, the louder it became, not in volume, but in presence. The name Allah now seemed to fill spaces in her life that she didn't even know were empty. She began noticing how her heart reacted differently when she heard the word. It no longer triggered mockery or disbelief. It triggered stillness. Something was shifting and she couldn't stop it. Quietly, she started to explore more, watching videos, reading articles, listening to Muslims talk about their faith. At first, it was casual, but soon it became intentional. She wanted to know why this word, just a word, had affected her so deeply. She came across a Quran translation online and decided to open it randomly. No expectations, no agenda, just curiosity. The first verse her eyes landed on was from Surah Al-Baqarah. This is the book about which there is no doubt, a guidance for those conscious of Allah. Her hands froze. She read the verse again and again. That phrase, no doubt, stuck with her. It was bold, unapologetic, confident. Could a book really be free of doubt? Could it truly be a guide? That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking, what if the name she had mocked was actually the answer to the restlessness inside her? What if Allah wasn't a concept, but a reality? A truth? Over the next few weeks, her journey deepened. She read more of the Quran, each verse feeling strangely personal, like it was speaking directly to her, reaching into her thoughts, answering questions she hadn't even asked out loud. The compassion of Allah, the emphasis on justice, mercy, sincerity. It all felt right. It didn't demand blind belief. It invited reflection. The more she learned, the more she saw that Islam wasn't just a religion, it was a path of clarity. And Allah wasn't just a name, He was the one she had unknowingly been seeking. The journey that began with mocking had turned into longing. And what echoed in her heart wasn't confusion anymore, it was hope. And something told her that if she kept following that name, she would finally find peace. She couldn't understand how everything about her life had started to revolve around a name she once ridiculed. Every day, she felt herself being drawn deeper into a quiet, unexpected connection with the word Allah. It was strange at first, how it softened her anger, calmed her doubts, and made her want to know more instead of argue. She found herself sitting alone at night, whispering the name just to feel how it rested on her tongue. It didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt familiar, gentle. Her friends began to notice a change in her. She wasn't debating as much. She wasn't mocking religions online like before. Instead, she seemed quieter, more reflective. One of them asked if she was okay. She simply nodded. She couldn't explain what was happening inside her. It was too sacred, too raw to be spoken out loud yet. How do you explain that the very name you once laughed at now lives in your heart? She began journaling. Every new thing she learned about Allah, she wrote down. Every verse that touched her, she noted. The stories of the prophets, the compassion of the Quran, the logic of belief, the simplicity of Islam. It was all beginning to fit together like a puzzle that had been waiting for her to see the full picture. She started listening to stories of reverts, people who had walked a path like hers, starting from doubt, ending in faith. Each story made her cry, not out of sadness, but because she finally felt understood. One day she stood in front of the mirror and asked herself, "What are you waiting for?" The question pierced her. She had read enough, cried enough, reflected enough. She knew deep inside that Allah wasn't just a name. It was her Creator calling her back. Her heart answered before her mind could, and with trembling hands she searched for how to say the Shahada. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime of searching. As she recited them, peace washed over her. Not the kind of peace that comes and goes, but the kind that settles deep in the soul. She had finally come home. The name she once mocked had become the anchor of her life. She sat quietly in the masjid, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was filled with soft murmurs, the peaceful rhythm of people in prayer and the faint scent of musk. She had never imagined herself in a place like this. A year ago, she would have mocked the very idea of stepping into a mosque. But now, everything felt different. The woman who used to laugh at the word Allah had been transformed by something far beyond logic. It was something spiritual, something real. What broke her the most wasn't a debate or an argument, it was silence. The silence of a Muslim woman she had once ridiculed during an online conversation. She had expected anger, a fight, a defense. Instead, that woman responded with complete silence, followed later by a simple message, "I'll pray for you." That message haunted her. Who does that? Who responds to mockery with prayer? And she couldn't get it out of her head. That quiet dignity, that confidence without arrogance, it planted a seed in her heart. From that moment, she began watching videos secretly. She listened to converts sharing their stories. She started reading the Quran, not to disprove it, but to understand why it moved people so deeply. And then it happened. She found that one verse, a verse that shattered the wall around her heart, a verse that said, "Allah is closer to us than our jugular vein." That line echoed in her for days. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't stop thinking about it. How could this be? How could the very faith she once saw as foreign suddenly feel like the truth she had been running from all her life? And here she was now, sitting in the masjid, surrounded by peace, tears rolling down her cheeks. No one forced her to be here. No one convinced her. It was Allah Himself who guided her heart. She remembered every book she read, every podcast she listened to, every moment of doubt she faced. It had all brought her to this moment. As she whispered the words of the Shahada, a calm settled over her that she never knew was possible. She was no longer a skeptic. She was now a believer. And this was just the beginning of a new, beautiful chapter. She now walked with a peace that words couldn't fully describe. Her heart, once cluttered with questions, doubts, and criticism, now rested gently in certainty. Every time she heard the name Allah, it stirred something deep within her, a sense of comfort, love, and humility. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was the center of her life, the anchor of her soul. Her transformation wasn't sudden, it was slow, deliberate, and deeply personal. Every chapter of her journey, from mocking the word Allah to embracing it with her whole being, had purpose. She remembered the endless nights researching, the debates she engaged in, the books she read to disprove Islam. Ironically, those same books guided her to the truth. She had read so much, yet it was one verse in the Quran that spoke louder than anything else ever had. Now, each day began and ended with remembrance. Her mornings started with a quiet dua. Her nights closed with tears of gratitude. She had once believed that Islam would restrict her, but she found it to be the very thing that gave her freedom. The freedom to be still, to breathe, to understand her purpose, and to live with intention. People around her noticed the change. She didn't argue anymore. She didn't chase validation. She didn't fear being alone because she never felt alone. She was more present with her family, kinder to strangers, more patient in times of stress. The more she embraced her faith, the more beautiful life became. She hadn't lost herself. She had found who she truly was. One of her friends, still an atheist, asked her what exactly changed her. She smiled and said, "It wasn't a person. It wasn't a debate. It was a verse. A verse that made me feel like God knew me, loved me, and was waiting for me to return to Him." She didn't need applause or attention. Her heart was full. Islam didn't make her perfect. It made her whole. And in that wholeness, she discovered what it meant to truly live. Not just exist, but to live. With faith, with clarity, with love, and most of all, with peace that came from simply saying, La ilaha illallah. As we come to the end of this incredible journey, it's clear that sometimes the greatest transformations happen quietly, within the heart. What started as skepticism and mockery turned into reflection, understanding, and finally deep faith. This story reminds us that no matter where we come from or what doubts we carry, a single moment, a single verse, or even a silent act of kindness can open doors we never expected. Islam, for her, was not just a religion, but a source of true peace and belonging. A guiding light that changed her life forever. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this heartfelt story. If you found inspiration or comfort in this video, please like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories that touch the soul and bridge hearts. Your support means the world and encourages us to continue sharing powerful journeys of faith and hope. Remember, every story is a step towards understanding and unity. May peace and blessings be with you always, and may your own journey bring you light and peace.